Let's see, we are live. I was about to say happy Tuesday, but it is Wednesday. We are live at our new time, besties and bosses. How are y'all doing? This is so fun. If you don't know what's going on, I changed our live stream time. We've been going live Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern for, years. When I started my business, when I started this Facebook group, I should say, I haven't had this Facebook group for as long as my business. We were going live on Mondays. We switched it up to Tuesdays for the last couple of years, but I now have a mastermind call on Tuesdays that I want to be able to make. So a reminder to all of you, you can change things up and it's okay. And you can make things work for your business. So I see us in the group. We are here. I am excited to chat. I'm all cozy. I live in New York City, for those of you who don't know that as well. We had our first real snow. We've had flurries over the winter, but then it's turned into rain, and it is now, I think it's 18 or 19 degrees out. And I have to go out later for an appointment, and I gotta say, I don't mind the cold, but because we've had a pretty mild winter up until now, I'm like, okay, we gotta get the warm coat out, gotta get the furry boots out. We're gonna see how that goes. But I'm all bundled up inside and I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've got an important one today. We're going to be talking money, but particularly I really want to have a specific money conversation around what people are talking about who are making multi 6 and 7 figures around money, because I think what really sucks, to say it as frankly as I can, is how little, as someone who's wanting to make money and have financial literacy and stability, how little oftentimes you can get access to the conversations that people who are making money and leveraging money and winning at the game of money are having, because those conversations are usually happening behind closed doors. And so often the conversations you get to see in front of closed doors are either celebrations around money or are money conversations from people who are smart but not necessarily having access to the same information and getting to do the same things with money. And so I think sometimes it just really hinders business owners and I think it keeps a lot of people under earning. I think it keeps a lot of people limiting their capacity to leverage their money, understanding money. So it's a conversation that is really important to me. It's such a mission and part of my work. If you've been a part of my world for any length of time, you know that yes, I love money, but I think money is such a lens to help us see what's going on with us. But I think it's also one of those assets, one of those tools that is very neutral, but it is the language of business, and it is something pretty much all of us in the modern world need to understand and know how to use. And yet what I think is so unfortunate, I put this in the email if you're on my email list, what I think is so unfortunate is money is also one of the most stigmatized topics. It is a topic that has a lot of charge, even though money itself is neutral. There can be a lot of shame, there can be just a lot of discomfort, scarcity, fear, a lack of knowingness. I think there's a lot of power struggles that happen with money. I think there's just a lot that gets put around money or that can come up with money that I think is, again, it just makes the playing field not very even for all of us, for business owners. And I want to even that out more. And I think money is something, the more you talk about it, right? It's the Brene Brown quote, that shame festers in the dark. The more we talk about money and normalize certain things, the less shame there is. That's why I had the conversation last year, which was actually this week's podcast episode, where I shared, spoiler alert, that I didn't make more money last year, but why that's still great. I still invested. I did the math on this. So we invested still, can't do math, I'm counting on my fingers. I still invested between 42 and 45K last year, even though we didn't make more money. And that's just into investments to grow my wealth. That's not including savings or anything like that. And that's on not on a necessarily high year. And I think those are the kinds of things that are helpful to hear about and that most people aren't even thinking about. But also I wanted to normalize what money is like in business for someone who's making multi 6 figures and has a sustainable business. And we were actually more profitable last year than ever. And I think some of the benefits for that. So that's on the podcast. Check that out. But it is just such a mission of mine to have more of those conversations. And I'm very blessed. I grew up, my mom was a data analyst. She was a head at a bank in London. I was born in London, or just outside London. So I grew up with a mom who worked in banking, at the top of banking in data, and that is my influence with money. I grew up learning about money and using money. I had my first savings when I was like 7. I started investing when I was like 21, and I've been in business and in circles and privy to these kinds of conversations for a really long time as well with other people who are not only making money but doing smart things with their money. And so anyway, that's the point of this conversation today. I want to bring more of that to you. I should also see if we have no comments, but that's what we're going to dig into today. So before we dive in, a couple announcements. If you're live and say hi, and I know this might take a couple of weeks for us to get used to this time, but if you join me live this week, I am giving away 1 copy to my self-study workshop, Leverage Your Unique Millionaire Money Blueprint. It's a great workshop. It is both a video that walks you through identifying your money blueprint, and then there's an accompanying playbook workbook that goes kind of in depth so that you can rewrite that if you want to. I think it's really a powerful workshop and class that we ran last year. It's something I usually charge for. We'll give away one of those. All you gotta do is leave me an emoji, a comment, anything, and you will be entered to win that, and we'll pick winners for that. Also, before we dive into this topic, I'll remind us all at the end of this live stream, we've got a free masterclass coming up at the end of this month. Masterclasses are my favorite, aside from serving my clients. I love serving my clients. That is my favorite part of my business. But I love getting to share masterclasses with you. And this month, we are going to dive into 20K months multiplied. I'm going to give you my blueprint for making sustainable revenue and for sustainably scaling. The reason I wanted to have this class in particular, and I want to walk you through the 5 components you need to sustainably scale, is I cannot tell you how many calls I've had over the last year with people who are doing great. They're making 8K, 10K months, maybe even 12K, sometimes 15K months, but understanding what they need to make 20K months, and not just to make a one-time 20K month because someone's paid in full, though we are here for that, we are not mad at that, but to be able to have that sustainably month after month, and to be able to sustain those 20K months, I think is something that is very challenging for a lot of business owners. And the reason for that, I've been doing this for years. I've been making 20K plus months. We make usually between about 30 to 40K months with a one-on-one only model for 4 years at this point, and even probably 4 years at this point. And I've helped clients to 250K plus years up to the $1 million plus mark since my first year in business. And what I can tell you, and I think what's really frustrating, is it's sort of that whole saying, what got you here won't get you to where you want to go next. What is required of you to make your first 6-figure year is one set of business skills. What it takes to double that and then to sustain that does require some shifts. And this isn't like some complicated thing that like you're not privy to information, but there are some shifts that have to be made. So that's what we're going to talk about through this masterclass. That's what I'm going to walk you through, those 5 components in this masterclass, so you understand what it takes to not only double your revenue, but to sustain that month after month. And if 20K months aren't on your radar and you're looking at your first 5K month, still come join us, because I think a lot of what we're talking about is still really great things to understand in business. And what I will tell you is I made my first 10K month, and my first 24K month was like the month afterwards. And this is all the stuff I wish I had known then, because then I sort of backslid into, not bad, but 12, I think, to 17K months for quite a while, until some of these pieces got into place, until I understood them to be able to hold 25K to 40K months. So come join us anyway. I think it'll be a really valuable class and just help, what's the word I'm looking for? Not dismantle, demystify is what I'm looking for. It'll help, I think, to demystify some of just the really practical things that go into sustainably scaling your business, and just important business principles, which is so much of what I'm about. Okay, so let's talk today about money. So we talk so much about making money, sustaining money. That's what the masterclass is about. I wanted to talk a little bit more today about literally the conversations I've had just over the last couple of months with people who are making multi-6 and 7 figures and above, and the types of conversations they're having about money. Because something I've really learned when it comes to money, I think, and I think that I put this in the email as well, I think so often we learn the most by having these conversations, right? By bringing these conversations up and not just talking about frustrations with money, or not only talking about like how to make more money, but what to do with our money. And I think this just, unless you're in those circles, especially as a woman, I hate that is the case, but I think I'm really lucky. My group of close girlfriends, we talk about this stuff, but I think I have a very specific group of girlfriends. I just don't think these are the things that, and maybe, I mean, I would love to be proven wrong on that. I would love to hear that this is shifting, but I think these are just the things we want to know more about. So this is less about, actually, maybe that's helpful to hear. So in in the groups I'm in, whether that's my peer group and my friend group or in some of the masterminds I'm in, or when I'm talking with my coach, or when I'm talking with my mom, when we're talking about money, yes, some of the conversations are around how to make more money and, marketing and sales, absolutely. And yes, some of the conversations are around like, what are the fun things to do? Like, are you going to fly first class? Are you going to go on a big trip? Like, what's the fun thing you're going to buy? Like, of course we're having those conversations as well. Like, abso-freaking-lutely. I think part of, and this is in the, if you win the Leverage Your Unique Millionaire Money Blueprint, I talk a lot in there about what, what's their name? The Psychology of Money. Morgan, I cannot think of their last name, but they talk about this in the psychology of money in terms of that balance of money now and money later. Rich is your definition of being rich is the money you have now. It's the money other people can see. It is your lifestyle. It's the money you make that you spend on the purse, the first class ticket, the car, the home, right? That is being rich. Wealth is the money you invest. It is the money people can't see. It is what you do with your money, how you leverage it to have your money. It's your assets column. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about this in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? There's liabilities and there's assets. Being rich is essentially a liability, and being wealthy is all of your assets, how you're using your money to make more money. So in these circles I'm in, yes, we're absolutely talking about the richness and the liabilities column, but we're all very clear that those are liabilities. And I will say I do slightly disagree with Robert Kiyosaki in terms of the things you spend money on, that richness being a liability. Only in that, and again, I talk about this in the in that workshop, only in that as a business owner, I really do think there's something to be said when you spend your money with intention and with joy, and it's something that is feeding you as an entrepreneur, that's also allowing you to enjoy the fruits of your labor, and that's allowing you to bring joy. I do think that it becomes an asset in that you are the golden goose that lays the golden eggs. You are the person in your business that is generating money. If it's really tough, I found, and I see this through my clients so often, if you're not enjoying the fruits of your labor, if you're not pouring back into yourself, if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying money, if you're not circulating money, money is meant to be circulated. If you're not in that place, I think it is tough to allow more money in. If you're just hoarding all of your money, I think that's actually a form of scarcity and fear. And I think sometimes that can, like if we're worrying, if we're just in scarcity, if we're just in fear, that's oftentimes going to create a plan that something bad is going to happen. I don't actually think that is the place in which you generate more money from. So I do slightly disagree from a more mindset, energetic, spiritual, if you believe in manifesting perspective, and that I do think some liabilities, what you spend your money on now, can be used to generate more if we're coming from that lens. Hopefully that's tracking. Let me know if that makes sense what I'm saying there, because I think that's maybe helpful to understand. So that is something we are talking about in those circles, absolutely. But we're still very clear on a practical, like if we're thinking about money as a game, and I think about money as a game, if you know me, I love board games, and I love the strategy of board games, and I love board games where there's asset allocation, where the whole board game is essentially you're building an engine to create essentially money, but it's like fake money that allows you to buy more things so that eventually you can win the game and have a ton of points. I'm excellent at those games. I always win those games, just saying. And with that, what that mentality there has given me is it helps me to see all of this is really a game. Money is a bit of a game. And so if we're looking at more of the game of money, the practical game of money, and how you can, in air quotes, win at the game of money, what I would say is the conversations I'm having with peers and masterminds, with people who are making multi 6 and 7 figures, with people who are millionaires and more, we're looking at it that way. So yes, we're talking about liabilities, but we're also usually talking very clear that that is a liability, and we're spending money on liabilities because it gives us joy, because it allows us to enjoy the fruits of our labors. And usually that is because that is our overflow after looking at asset building, asset buying. And so a lot of the conversations we're having are looking at things like, well, I'm going to break this down. So I made a whole list here. These are literal conversations I've had recently, but I know for me, and if it's helpful to hear, we're looking at first, how can we increase our assets column, not our liabilities column? And again, I use the word liabilities lightly because I don't actually think your liabilities are liabilities, but we are looking at what are the investments we can make, whether that's back into our own business, into our own team, into ourselves, right? I consider myself the biggest asset in my life and business. So maybe it's not if I invest in coaching, for example, if I invest in therapy, for example, if I invest in the gym, that's not necessarily like when I invest in my coach, I'm literally going to see, like as a stock market, a return on that investment, or when I go to the gym. But those are all I think I am the golden goose that lays the golden egg. So those are investments I definitely see a return on. But we're also talking about how we're diversifying our portfolios. Are we investing in real estate? Are we investing in the stock market? Are we investing into a different type of retirement fund? These are all conversations we're having. And what I will say, I really, really encourage you to see, maybe this is a conversation you want to have with your spouse or with your friends, or are there some people in your life who you might want to start having these conversations with? Because I grew up learning about this stuff. I know a lot about this stuff, and I will say every time I have this conversation with someone, my mind is open to something different I could do with my money, or I'm expanded in terms of what I could do with my money, or I get insight into like, oh, here's a stock that's doing well, or this is when I started investing in crypto. It's because I was having conversations around this, and that helped to educate me and to help me feel a little bit I just have a different understanding of why I might want to make that sort of investment, and understanding that is probably one of the more riskier ones I'm going to make, and why I want to maybe have some of that risk and not just have everything that's a safe bet when I'm investing. Laura says hi, loving this topic. I don't know why. I think I was just like in my like chat world and didn't even see your comment there. Nice to have you here. Fun to have you at our new time. And I love this topic. I also love this topic. I mean, I don't know if you caught this at the beginning, Laura, but I love this topic because I think this for me, if you start to understand money and understand the game of money, it matters a whole lot less how much money your business makes, and it matters a lot more if you're profitable and what you do with that profit. You can be a multimillionaire without ever making $1 million in your business year over year. I know that I will, even if we don't do a whole lot more and my business never grows, I am going to retire probably early. I mean, I probably won't retire early because I won't want to, but I could with multiple millions because of playing the game of money and understanding this. And I think this is where in our online space, I get frustrated sometimes because we just talk about always making more money as the solution. And not only do we not talk about profitability, but we don't talk about what to do with that profit. And not that I'm like up at night worrying, but I worry for business owners who are then just going to be stuck in the hustle game forever without having something that is going to allow them to have the financial security, stability. I will say this is when you get the real passive revenue. Like I made a whole lot of money. I think I said this in the live stream last year. Made a whole lot of money doing nothing over the last couple of months because my crypto's up, my stocks are up. And of course that's going to ebb and flow, but how fun is that? Like I didn't have to do anything and I made a whole lot of money. And that's what I want us to be all more aware of, instead of just always thinking we need to like go hustle and create and sell something new. Laura says, missed the beginning. Thanks for the context. And yes, love this empowering perspective of playing the game of money versus asking my business to generate everything on its own. Yes. And not that we don't want our businesses to generate anything, but if this is helpful for everyone to hear, the way I think about my business, I love my business. You all know I will choose work I love that feeds my soul, that I believe supports and serves other people over the money all day, every day. And I also love money very, very much, clearly, but I see money very neutrally as a game. But I really see my business as it gets to feed my passion and it gets to make me money I wouldn't be able to make in a 9-to-5. But I don't see my business as a thing. I mean, it probably will still it's made me very rich, but I really see what I do with that money as the thing that's making me wealthy. And I do think there's such a distinction between richness and wealthiness, or being rich and being wealthy. And so I see my business as the vehicle for giving that profitability that gets to build the wealth, because I'm really smart with what I do with that money. I need to preface this, y'all. I am not a financial advisor. I am not a financial planner. This is not financial advice. I have a lot of experience with this and I'm very good with money, but no one should take financial advice from me. Please hear that. Take these more as these are the conversations people are having that I want you to be and to invite you to think about. Not this is a financial advice. I'm not saying go rush and like invest in crypto. It's up right now anyway. I'm not a financial advisor, but probably not the best time to do it anyway. You want to invest when things are down, in my opinion, which is what I did the last couple of years when it was down more. Okay. Anyway, bringing us back to some of the things I wanted to chat about here. Throw questions at me, though. I'm so happy to be an open book and I want this to be valuable for everyone. So and these again, these are just, I took some notes on like recent conversations we're all having, because I think the online space makes it seem like all anybody is talking about is like the new mastermind they're investing in, that they're spending 50K on, and like the first class trips they're taking. And we talk about that too. And I am here for that also. But these are the actual conversations that I think are valuable that we're having. So a big conversation that I just had on a mastermind call was really talking about the importance of profitability over revenue and across the board. And these are people making great money. All of us were saying we really aren't focused at all on our revenue number for this year, nor were we last year. Not that we don't care that it increases, but the profitability number is so much more what we're all focused on. And I think hopefully that's refreshing to hear. But I think, again, when we see marketing, and this isn't bad, we have to remember that when we see things online, a lot of times what we're looking at is marketing, not the like behind the scenes, what's actually going on. I get to talk about this more because I have a one-on-one practice that's full, so I don't have to be in like sexy marketing mode as much. So it's a little easier for me to have these conversations, I think, without I guess damaging my business, so to say. But I think it's really important to hear that. A lot of times when you're hearing people talk about money online, they're talking about top line revenue. But if you're listening to the conversations behind closed doors, ideally, people are, I don't know people in other circles, but the circles I'm in, what we're actually looking at is profitability and what's driving profitability and what's increasing profit margins. Or another big conversation we're having is looking at what are the smart investments in our business that maybe are going to cut profitability, but why that matters for the long-term growth in our business, because all of us are taking a very long-term look at not only our business and our business's revenue and profitability, but also when we're talking about winning the game of money, your time is your biggest asset in the game of money, right? If I had started my business in my 20s and started investing at a level in my 20s, I would have so much more when I retire. And that's not to make anything wrong, but just in terms of like how that works. Even if I invested far, far less than I am now in my 40s, simply because of the compound effect and time in the market. And so it's the same thing with business, right? Sometimes we have to look at the long game. I think sometimes when we see marketing, we see so many things that are very instant gratification, short-term focused, as opposed to, again, behind closed doors, when I'm looking and talking with people who are making multi 6-7 figures, sometimes they're looking at how am I going to really strategically invest in something that's going to give me a long-term gain, a long-term ROI, a long-term increase in my profit margin, but it's going to cost me in the interim. I'll use myself as an example. I shared this all with you, I think, in our one of our lives last year, but my up level in my business last year is we built out my data dashboards on the back end. That was a big investment up front, and I did not have a huge ROI on that right away, and I'll probably see the bigger ROI on that over the next 5 years or so. It cost quite a bit of money to put that in, so that was a temporary decrease in profit margin, but it was me being very smart and intentional investing in my business, knowing long term that's giving me the data to not only increase, being smart with where we're putting energy into marketing and sales and increasing conversion rates, but also profitability, because I'm seeing we've already started making shifts there and seeing, oh, we're spending in certain places that aren't giving us the return we want. Like what a smart place to cut back and to reallocate assets so that we can have a bigger profit margin. Does that make sense? So I think that's one of those things that can be a little confusing, and I think confusing in our space as well, because I'm always so mindful with this conversation because I never want it to sound like, as a coach, I'm like, well, you just need to invest in your business and make more money. And that is the way investing goes, right? If we look at the stock market, not even your business, the reason I was able to make a bunch of passive revenue over the last couple months is because I invested for years, and I invested and kind of like cut into my now money so that I could get a return later. The reason I can look at profitability in my business, and part of what I am looking at is continuing to make smart investments in my business, continuing to invest in support, continue to invest into team, maybe taking a temporary dip in that profit margin because the long-term gains are going to give me more profitability. But big thing here there to understand is, again, I think it's just easy to think all people talk about is like their their bougie stuff that they buy. And again, I am here for the bougie things. And like really the conversations we're having are, what are the smart investments to make? What aren't the smart investments to make? Where does it make sense to cut temporarily into profit to be able to make more profit long term? Where do we want to cut overall because these things aren't making sense or because the industry has changed to have more profitability? But how can we look at profitability over revenue instead of simply chasing revenue is, I think, I think it's an important conversation, but that's a big one we were having just before or just at the start of this year. And kind of with this, part of what we were talking about, and I think, again, maybe just helpful to know, like, maybe this sounds boring, but like this is literally the stuff people are talking about, is we were all just having a conversation around just I think maybe this is helpful to hear, but I know in 2020, when our online space grew up, that's the year that I was, I've shared this multiple times, I was quite overbooked in my business. I think I had 29, 30 clients at one point. And for those of you who don't know, I only do one-on-one. I offer quite a bit of support between sessions. So I was able to maintain that, but because I had like 6-month contracts, I had to, it was COVID, it was okay, I was at home, but I threw money at a lot of things. And I think most people did online because the space was really different. That time was really different. People were a lot busier. I think there were just a lot of things that were different than our industry now. But part of the conversation we were all having is it's not 2020 anymore. And me, for example, I've course corrected and we're now fully booked instead of overbooked and maintaining that. And so there are also places where I think this is just helpful to see, and this is just something I'm always thinking about with money, where it's like, where are the places that I was investing at one point that did serve my business, that did serve me, or in my personal life? Where are the places that maybe I was spending money that really made sense in that season? But it's like those reoccurring like payments you have for things where if you ever like check your credit card, you're like, what am I paying for? My husband and I did this the other day. I'm like, how many different like TV subscriptions are we paying for that we don't even watch a show there? But I think that can happen in business as well, because we get so in the mode of doing things, and also if things are working in your business, it kind of makes sense that your brain just thinks like, well, whatever we've been paying for, like that's the thing that's helping us to have results in our business. And a big thing I've been looking at is, where are the places that, yes, it made sense to invest in the past, but things have shifted, and it's sort of like that subscription for, I don't know, Paramount Plus, where I'm not watching anything there, but at one point I was 2 years ago, and I just forgot to cancel that subscription, and it's like adding up to spend all this money for something I'm not using. Where are the places in my business that I'm doing where, again, that wasn't wrong before, but it doesn't make sense now? And I think that's just an interesting thing to do an audit on in your business. I think so many of us have, it's sort of one of the things, this is so silly, and this isn't, I want to be very clear here because I'm not coaching everyone one-on-one. I am very, very big on don't invest in a Ferrari in your business when a Cavalier is going to get you where you want to go. However, don't be cheap in your business when you need an Audi and you need the engine because it's going to last for 10 years and that other jalopy that you bought off the lot's going to fall apart. Like, don't be, penny wise, pound foolish, but also like sometimes we're just buying for names. And so I'm really big on that with investing in things. So I don't want anyone to hear this where it's like, I'm going to now go look at everything I'm paying for, all the subscriptions, and cancel them all because they're useless. In many ways, I've invested in more things this year in my business. And one of the conversations we were having, I think this is a conversation people at that level of revenue in business who are being mindful of their money and wanting to not just be rich now, but wealthy later, is looking at where is the unnecessary spending happening? Where is the bloat, so to say? And I think all businesses get bloat. And I think all businesses, especially in busy seasons, get bloat. We see this in corporations, we see this in companies. And it's just a helpful, and I think part of the reason for that is when you're super busy, right? What you have, you don't have time, you have money as an asset. So you throw money at solutions. And right, I was overbooked, I was bloated, so we threw money at solutions. And it was also a different time where different things made sense. When you're no longer bloated, right, there's oftentimes like that's when we want to look at how do we reduce the bloat, so to say. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm not talking though anyone out of the things you need in your business. Like, I did not stop paying for, example, we use Satori to book in clients, or PayPal that takes, I was having a conversation with a client, they take 3% of whatever clients pay us. We didn't cut any of that because those are all very necessary tools in the business that keep the business running. We're talking more, there were certain things we were having team do that no longer was driving results, but we were spending X amount of hours per month at X dollar, where it's like, this is just silly. It made sense. It made sense in 2020 when the online space looked very different than it does now. Okay, another thing we were talking about, and I think again, these are just I wish we had more of these conversations. I hope this is valuable for everyone. But is looking at things like tax savings and not being weird. And again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a financial planner, y'all. I feel like I need to keep saying that for a disclaimer for legal reasons. But one of the, and I've probably shared this on here before, and we've had conversations like this, but when I say tax savings, I am not talking about how to be weird or do illegal things to like try to cut corners. That is not what we're talking about. I think there are, as business owners, there are lots of things you can do that some accountant will approve that will get you in trouble down the road. Please don't hear this that way. Please don't do those things. I personally just think it is so silly. And in my opinion, if you're like, can I write this, I don't know, purse off or this makeup off, because technically some accountant's going to let you, the like little amount that's actually going to save you in taxes is so not worth whatever the fine you're going to get is later, in my opinion. I'm a goody two shoes when it comes to that. But we are talking about legit things. As a business owner, depending on how your business is set up and structured, there are so many very legitimate things you can run through your business that you then get to use pre-tax dollars to pay for and get a tax savings in. And I think, look, people can say that's unfair. I also think as business owners, we pay for a lot of things that employees don't, like our own healthcare and self-employment tax and all of the expenses to run our business. So I personally think it just is evening the playing field out. I think we also take a lot more risk on as business owners, and I think a lot of us employ quite a few people. So I don't think it's as personally. I think it's just different. I think it's just leveling the playing field out. But that does mean, whether you think it's fair or not fair, if you live in the US, I know it's different in other countries, and we have a lot of people here in other countries, but if you live in the US, and I'm sure in other countries it is very similar, I have clients all over the world, and for most of them it's the same. There are so many tax advantages to being a business owner, but if you don't know them, you don't know them. And I know a couple of years ago, not like I didn't get tax savings, but I missed out on huge amounts of tax savings that we started to implement. And it was because I just wasn't privy to these conversations. And it's sort of like, if you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't know, you don't even know what to go Google or to go look for. So, and I think there's probably still more that I'm not aware of that I learn every year. But just to name like a few things, because I think I'm sure I've shared this in this group before, but one of the biggest things that has supported me is being aware that once you're making a little over six figures in your business, it might be worth, again, I'm not a financial advisor, do not take financial advice from me. However, this is information I wish I had known. It might be worth talking to your accountant, talking to your lawyer, talking to your CPA about becoming an S Corp. There are simple things like how you set up your retirement. There, you can have a SEP, you can have a solo 401k that you can then use your business to pay for to invest in your retirement at a much larger amount than a traditional Roth or 401k or traditional IRA. Sorry, that's what I was thinking of. But that's also going to come from your business, and that will essentially be taxed. You won't be taxed on that until you retire and you pull that money out. And so what did we last year? I think our max was $37,500. So we invested $37,500 into what's called a solo 401k. So that's great, because that's money that it's like double dipping. This is when I talk about the game of money. This is winning the game of money, because I'm getting not only whatever that benefit is from that investment year over year, but that's $37,500 that we are not paying taxes on in the business either, which is pretty significant, along with, business expenses and things like that, which is another reason why don't be penny wise, pound foolish. For example, I always think about this with my business coach, because she's one of my bigger line items expense-wise, because I pay her base rate plus revenue share the same way that I have my business structured. So it's a pretty big line item, but I know I'm either going to pay her or I'm going to pay the government, because that is a legitimate tax write-off, right? My business pays that. Kim Argetsinger, individual, does not pay for that. And if I wasn't paying for that, like, okay, maybe it's not a 1-for-1, but I would have a larger number that I would be, I would have a larger number that I would be paying for that. And if I wasn't paying for that, like, okay, maybe it's not a 1-for-1, but I would have a larger number that I would be paying for that. And if I wasn't paying for that, like, okay, maybe it's not a 1-for-1, but I would have a larger paying taxes off of. So I always think of it as, well, I could either like, and to me that's double dipping. And this is when I play board games, and when I bid at board games, I'm always thinking, how could I not just make a move that is going to move me forward in the game? I want to win this game. And the way to win a game is to build an engine where you get to double dip or triple dip on basically when you make a move, you've built an engine up where you do one thing and it triggers a bunch of other benefits from you. This is why I win at board games. Money is the same way, right? You can invest in a retirement, you dip once, great. You do this through your business, you're double dipping because now it's also a tax savings, right? I can invest in coaching, that's dipping once. I'm going to get the ROI of what the coaching benefits me as a human. But if I'm doing it through my business, I'm double dipping. I'm getting the tax benefit off of that as well. And then if I take the ROI that I make off of that and the increased revenue, right, and the increased profit margin, right, I can invest that again, right? You can just see how that can keep stacking up for you. So these are the conversations we're having, but this is also how I'm always thinking about leveraging money. Is it's sort of like a piece of content. I don't want to just create a piece of content once and then just have it go out to the pasture to die. It's a horrible phrase, by the way, but there we go, right? I want to think, how can I double dip with a piece of content? Ideally triple dip with a piece of content I'm creating so that I'm leveraging it and using it multiple times. That's how I'm thinking about money, and that's, I think, a lot of the conversations we're having that I want to invite you to be thinking about, because I think it also just makes it so much more fun. I think I don't know, you'll have to tell me, or if you're, because I think you're still live here, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I think so often when we're looking at money, when we're looking at money because we feel like we don't have enough, or we're in fear, or like, how do I make more? Or how do I keep up with others? Or just like in that mentality of like either feeling like scarcity or chasing to make more, or just like, if I make this $1, I get to buy something that's $1, right? It's that even energy exchange. I think that's how most of us are thinking about money, and that's fine, but I don't think that's very fun. I think that is what triggers either the shame or the not enoughness or the stress or the fear. I think when we can start to see money as very, very neutral, but almost as like chits in a game, that if we're playing with them in a certain way, one chit can suddenly equal 3, or one chit can equal 20, right? To me, it almost like takes some of the emotional charge out of money, and it makes it a lot more fun, because I'm just always like, all right, well, sometimes we're going to lose this game. We're going to make a couple moves, like it didn't work out the way I wanted to, but I know there's like some optimization here that when I move this chit forward 1, it's going to give me a windfall of 25. And I don't know if this is making sense, but to me, I think that just helps us see money in a different way. And I think when we can start to see it as more fun and have a little more levity and less as this scary thing or this charged thing or this thing to feel bad about, or even this thing where it's like, if I was good enough, I would make more money in my business, or my business has to be responsible for every part of my meeting all of my financial needs, right? That's so much pressure and stress. And I think this helps remove some of the stress. At least that's what I'm hoping for all of you here listening. Laura says yes, still here. And yes, this is a much more fun, less emotional way of looking at it. Good. That is my attention. Also, welcome to my brain. This is, for anybody who wants to know, at 7 years old, I was doing this kind of stuff with my money, and I think I told you all this, we got robbed when I first moved to the US from England to South Florida, and like within months we got robbed, and they robbed they took everything from our house. They took our suitcases that had all of our like family photos, all my mom's jewelry. They took literally half a jar of peanut butter. Like, they wiped us out, but they did not take my jar that had, I think it was either $7 or $9. I'm pretty sure I had $9 because I got 50 cents a week for allowance. And I was like, even at 7, I just remember being so happy. I was like, I won. I still got my $9. But that also shows you at 9, I was saving up my allowance, but my allowance, I was like, but 50 cents, even back in whenever that was not that much money. I had my little side businesses even at 7. And so that $9 was partially from my little side businesses. And so this is for y'all to know, like I should be sharing this all, but this is how my brain works. Laura says, love it. I won. It's like, so welcome to my brain, but hopefully that'll give everyone maybe you can borrow from this, because I definitely have my trauma and my things I've had to work through. This just happens not to be one of the places. Hi Najma. Okay, let's see what else here on the list. And then I'm gonna hop off because now that we're at the new time, I do have a call after this. The other thing we're talking about, so a couple other things we're talking about, because this was the other two other points I really wanted to make sure I touched on here, as opposed to just like me going down memory lane and basically telling y'all what a nerd I am and how funny my brain is with money. Funny, I think positive. But a big conversation we're also having is really having a goal. I think all of the people I know have really focused on over the last couple of years building up liquidity in their business and in their personal accounts. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this and what we were talking about. So what I mean by this is outside of investments, outside of the retirement we talked about, outside of like how can you leverage your money to make more money, what we were all talking about is how not only, well, how it's both very nervous system regulating, but also how it creates so much sustainability in business and allows, even if business is going through ebbs and flows, because I think for many of the people I know last year, they either, like I sustained last year, I think I definitely had a lot of clients who did scale and make more money, but there were a lot of people who sustained or contracted last year that I think in our space, and we've talked about that. And so how having liquidity, meaning having a really great buffer personally and in your business account, how that not only allowed all of us to feel really regulated in our business when the industry was doing what every business will do. I think I said this in our live stream last year, and I know this is like not the fun, sexy thing to talk about, but if y'all are staying in business like I plan to for the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to see another dip again, right? It probably won't come for 7 to 10 years. Just like we're going to see our economy go peak again, and it will have another dip again. Like this, if you look historically at what our economy has done, that is what it has done. It always self-corrects. Business will do the same thing. But if you know this and you're being smart, and this isn't like bad money mindset, this isn't like now we're manifesting doomsday stuff. This is just understanding business and understanding the economy and understanding patterns, right? As humans, we have patterns. Nature has patterns. I know I live in New York City. It didn't get cold yet, but that didn't mean I didn't go out and buy a new winter coat because I needed one, because I was like, well, I'm just going to be positive and manifest that it's not going to be cold this winter. No, I know that I live in New York City and it's a season and it's going to get cold. And today it's 18 degrees. And I'm really glad that I planned for winter. And I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be miserable, I'm not going to make it in winter. But I was like, no, it's going to get cold, so let's just buy a coat. So all of that to say for all of you, these are conversations we're having not from a negative money mindset perspective, but from a perspective of there are going to be seasons in the economy, in business, in everyone's personal life. How can we buy the winter coat or buy the summer tank top, right? And be smart with that and start to, when you're in seasons of summer or fall where you're reaping the harvest, right? And you're having more of an overflow, when you're more of an overflow, instead of only spending it on, I think this is one of the biggest traps in our online space. And this is why I want to have this conversation more. I cannot tell you how many people have booked calls with me and they made so much money, but they either have no profitability or they blew it all on either lifestyle or things they feel like they needed to show on social media to prove they're making a lot of money, or in investments that, look, I'm here for, I invest a lot in my business and personally into myself, probably more than most humans, because I see what an ROI there is, but you can also get over leveraged. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. And I think a lot of people got very over leveraged in our space, right? Because they thought it would just always be summer or always be fall, whatever is like the season we reap. And winter doesn't have to be bad, right? I had a great year last year. It just wasn't 2020. It just wasn't a summer year. I think this year will be a more summer year, however you want to say it. Point being, one of the conversations we were having is just how much it has served us to have that winter coat, so to say, to have some money that is liquid, meaning it's not tied up in stocks, it's not tied up in real estate, it's not tied up in a 50K or 100K mastermind. It is something that you can access both in your business and both personally, and having that runway built, because I know for all of us that meant last year, for example, I could invest in up leveling and having those data dashboards or continue to invest in support. I never had to worry about paying my team. I never had to worry about paying myself, even if it wasn't the same as a couple of years ago. And that creates a lot of nervous system regulation, a lot of stability, but that also means you can keep making the moves. I keep using the board game example, but I know when I play those board games, if I build up a good reserve, right, I can make a bold move that's gonna make a dip, even if I'm like not winning, that's going to allow me to win the game. But you can't do that if you don't have the assets, if you don't have the reserve. And so I know this is a frustrating conversation if you're not in overflow, but the industry is picking. I have seen so much momentum at the beginning of this year. I've seen my clients just, it is blowing my mind just in terms of like just the first, what do we like, look at my calendar, 17 days into the year, just how much I'm seeing this year. So I think the season has changed for our industry. And I think for all of you, as you're, even if right now you're like, Kim, must be nice, I'm not making overflow, you will be in a place of overflow. And I want you to bookmark this thought where it's not how do you get into hoarding mentality. We talked about that earlier. That's not going to serve you. It's not squirrel everything away and don't enjoy the fruits of your labor. And it might also not be invest everything away, because investing is great and investing will compound, but investing, if the market's down, right, you don't want to pull the money out. Having some liquid cash and reserves and starting to build that up. And I just don't think these are conversations people are having forward facing. I think they're happening a lot behind closed doors. And this was a big conversation we all had, and how grateful. We were also saying how rare it is. I think it's really normal because the people I'm in a mastermind with and my peers, this is how we think. But I don't think there's a lot of spaces in our space that are talking about this. It's almost like, how can you just keep leveling up to the lifestyle stuff? I will say this for me is one of, it's just so nervous system regulating, but I think it also allows you to keep making money in your business because you don't get into that desperate place, and you get to keep investing in the team and the support you need. Okay. Hi, Terry. She says, love this. Time for summer. Yes, time for summer. Time for summer indeed. I'm glad this is landing. Also, I'm just noticing my hair is doing weird things, y'all. I am trying, I'm like such a squirrel. But for the ladies on this call, I'm trying to get better at not washing my hair every day. I have the kind of hair you have to wash every day, and I'm testing out dry shampoos and like things. My hair, the day I wash it, is always like this. The day I do the dry shampoo, I'm like still trying to figure that out. If anybody who has fine hair like me, who's trying to test the dry shampoo thing out, if you have any dry shampoos you like or tips, let me know. Vain things that so don't matter and that are not about money at all, but here we go. You just get to hear all the inner workings of Kim's brain in 2024. That here, though, going back to the liquidity, I think when you start to build that up, that's how you get to avoid living paycheck to paycheck. And I think we talked about this in last year's live stream when I was talking about my numbers. One of the things I would really love to encourage all of you to start to work towards is getting out of the thinking of money on a month-to-month basis. I think our space is so wonderful in so many ways, and I do really appreciate that our space talks about money at least, and so like we start to normalize the conversation. But because of that, and I do it too for marketing reasons, right? We talk about like the monthly revenue. I literally have this month's masterclass, 20K months multiplied. So I'm not saying it's bad. However, what I find for so many of my clients is this really gets them in this hamster wheel way of thinking of, at every month, the counter starts over at zero, right? And so it's almost this like, dig a hole, fill it up at the end of the month. Did I reach whatever it is, 5K, 8K, 20K, whatever your like amount you need to make? And then it's like the counter resets at the beginning of the next month. And I find for many of my clients, that is a very stressful way to run your business, that also creates a lot of pressure and stress and like chasing, pushing, proving energy, which will push away clients, make it harder to make money, but also just doesn't feel great on your nervous system. And it doesn't feel very sustainable, and it can lead to burnout and all of the things here. It's also just not how business works. Outside of our online space, I feel like I say this all the time, but it's worth repeating. There is no business that is looking month to month. They're looking quarter to quarter, 6 months to 6 months, year to year, right? Like it is only in our space where we do this. And so if you start to build and maybe set a goal for this year where it's like, this is going to be the year. If you're like, Kim, this is so annoying because I'm not an overflow. I hear you. I've been there in my business as well. So none of this is to say like you should have this or you should even know to have this. But as you start to create some overflow this year, because let's just put it out there that everyone in this group is going to create overflow this year. As you create some overflow, I would really love to have you start thinking about setting a goal for like, what's the small amount of buffer you could have in your business account and in your personal account, because that little bit of buffer is also going to help you start to shift the mentality from the month-to-month revenue. I think part of the reason, besides the fact that we talk about it, that happens is because so many people don't think about having a buffer or don't have a buffer of any kind. So the month-to-month is really important because that's what everybody needs to pay their bills and pay their taxes and pay their team, and right? all of the things as business owners, we do have more expenses than an employee does at a 9 to 5. Like that is just the reality, just to normalize that. So I think that is one of the reasons it can be challenging to shift. And I think this is a way in which the practical strategy and the practical action and the practical planning can support your mindset. And together, I think this can like be part of what helps shift out of that mentality of I just every month when it hits the first, the counter goes back to 0. But either way, I would really just love to encourage everyone to stop thinking that way, because that's another conversation we had in this group, how little we're thinking about the revenue for the year or even for the month, and how much more it really is quarter to quarter, and so much more about the profitability that any of us are concerned with. And the reason for that, I think everyone in this group understands this, but it's maybe worth repeating as well. You can make a ton of revenue and have barely anything to show for it. Revenue is great, and I don't want to over glorify a profit margin, because you can also have the best profit margin in the world and not pay yourself all that well because you're being penny wise and pound foolish and not investing in the things that help you to grow revenue, even if it's at a slightly lower profit margin where you're paying yourself more. But I think looking at what you're actually paying yourself, looking at those numbers instead of just chasing the top line numbers, is just going to serve everyone, and then trying to get out of that month to month mentality. Terry says, it is so much pressure. This is so true. Yep, I love this reminder. A month-to-month shift is needed to create the buffer. Like when you have a 16K month and the next month isn't as high, it can be challenging. Love this. Yes, and I think I so appreciate you for saying that, Terry. I think this is something we talked about in that other live stream as well, that I think is just a helpful reminder that it's normal when you have a big month that the next month, unless it is something where you've set up reoccurring revenue, is probably not going to be as big for most people, because usually when you have a big month, whether it's 16K or 100K, right? If friend of my mastermind had, I think it was like 100K month. Her next month was not that. It was because of a launch. And right, and if she was going month to month, right, the next month she'd be like, oh my God, I suck and I'm stressed. Instead of, oh no, like I'm looking at this is like over the next 3 months, like kind of this averages out. It just helps conceptualize that a lot. But I think it's also helpful to normalize that, again, unless you're looking at reoccurring payments, which is why I'm a big fan on having a mix of like, yes, pay in fulls are great, but reoccurring payments are good as well. It is very normal to have those ebbs and flows, which is why getting out of the month to month mentality, but also planning, can be so serving. And again, for everyone, I want to be so mindful. I remember very, very much what it was like when I was making my first 3K months and my first 5K months and my first 10K months. And then, before that, I jumped very quickly from that to 24K months and then was kind of in that pocket. But I so remember thinking the month-to-month mentality, and I did have quite a lot of savings when I moved to New York City that I invested back into myself, into my business, but I cleaned that out to build this business. So I did not have a buffer. So I remember what that is like. So none of this is to say you should have that or you're wrong if you don't. This is supposed to be the opposite of that conversation. It is simply to say these are all normal stages in business, and these are the conversations not a lot of people are having, and sometimes it's helpful to be reminded of these are all normal stages in business, these are all normal seasons in business. And as you start to make overflow, think about how can you build up some of that liquidity, those accounts, how that serve your nervous system. How can we get out of the month-to-month thinking? Not you're wrong if you're not there yet, but how can you see this as maybe a goal and something to move into, instead of only thinking about how can we spend all of our money on all of the things, which I'm there for as well, but just how can we have a little bit of both, right? I think one of the things I really appreciate, and if this is helpful to hear, is I pay myself less than I could, and I have for years. I have a beautiful life in New York City, which isn't exactly the like cheapest place to live. I'm the main breadwinner for my family. We have like all the things we want, but that means I don't need the same month to month, but that does give us room to build some of those buffers and to invest so that we get to have our cake and eat it too, right? Like I splurge on things like paintings and dinners out, and all. It's not like we're scrimping. It's just we're making room for both. So I think that's more what I want to invite everyone here. I will keep saying that, like, right? We're not saying I want that combination of rich money now and wealth later. And that's what we talk about in that workshop, whoever wins that, right? Like it's that combination of both and finding that right combination for yourself. It's just many people are lopsided where it's either how do I spend all of my money now or how do I hoard all of it for later? We want to find, all of us are going to have a slightly different balance. We want to find that balance that really serves us. Terry says, I like the idea of having a mix of pay in full and monthly payments. Right, a buffer is something to build up. Exactly. I like the idea of thinking and planning 4 months in advance. I think that's so beautiful too, because is it 4 months? No, 3 months is 4 months a season? No, 3 months is a season. Laura says, I'm so team quarterly revenue and profit tracking instead of monthly. Yes. We are team quarterly tracking. And maybe that's helpful to hear for everyone too. I have because I have a revenue sharing model. I think sometimes this is like a slight tangent here, not what I'm talking about with other people, but I think sometimes people wonder how I plan with that or how I can feel okay like with that. And I base what I pay myself and what I live off of the base rate, which is a lot easier because I know what that's going to be. And with that, I still base it off of after taxes, team expenses, and investments. So I basically plan on paying all of that first and then pay myself, far less and like with room to buffer. And then when I have revenue share, right, like that is part of what builds the buffers and the investments and things like that. But that is not what I ever, and who knows, at a certain stage that like some of that might become more expected, but that's not necessarily what I'm basing these decisions on. And that also helps me to stay very regulated and also helps me to look at quarterly a little bit more easily. Or if there's a big swing, right, for me, it's like, well, that makes sense. A client just had a launch or something like that. Otherwise, I think it would be very easy, particularly in my business model, to put pressure on my clients or to put pressure on myself or to have expectations that if a client just had a big launch and that was a bigger revenue share month, right, for it to always be like that. And that's just not going to be the case and does not serve the model, in my opinion. Okay, let me just see if they're just seeing here, because I know I just want to make sure I took notes from, these are literal notes from conversations I had because I wanted to be as transparent. Hopefully you're also seeing like none of this is things you probably haven't heard about. I think they're helpful reminders, and it's helpful just to be having these conversations, because when you're thinking about it, you're like, oh right, I should think about X, Y, and Z, or I should use my money in X, Y, and Z way, or oh, maybe I do want to go talk to my accountant about, do I want to be an S Corp? Do I want to have a different, like, are there any other tax benefits or tax savings? I know just because of a conversation I was having with one of my friends, this year I reached out to my accountant. There were like 2 or 3 things that we are spending regularly personally that were absolutely very legitimate tax write-offs. And to me, like that's winning the game of money, right? That's the double dip. It's not like I'm going out and spending money just to get a tax savings. That to me is backwards and doesn't make sense. But this is money that we were spending no matter what, that was just being run through not the wrong channel, but run through the channel where I got to single dip as opposed to double dip. And by double dip, if anyone's hopping on late, I mean, I really like to think about, if I'm going to spend this money, how can I get more than one benefit? So then I get the benefit of whatever I'm spending the money on, but I also get the second double dip benefit of now it's a tax savings and a tax write-off, right? That's a win-win to me. So hopefully this conversation, if nothing else, is going to have you think about things like that, because then my brain thinks like, oh, and now we could triple dip, because if I'm making that tax savings, I'm making this up, but let's say it's $1,000 tax savings. Well, if I have an extra $1,000, I could reinvest that, this would be like quadruple dipping, into a retirement that's also a tax savings, or put it into one of my buffer accounts. But there's some really high yield savings accounts right now that are getting like 5%. I could take that $1,000 that on the money I would have already spent, that it gave me the tax savings, put it into a savings account that gets me 5%. Well, what's 5% off $1,000, right? Like now I'm triple dipping or quadruple dipping. Is this making sense? Like now we can see like these are ways where you're not having to go spend more money. It's just starting to think about it in this way. And these are the conversations we're having, and also how my particular brain happens to work. The last conversation, and I almost didn't put this on here because I know for some people this isn't going to resonate at all, but this was a very legitimate conversation I've had with quite a few people, and I think for others in this group it will just be maybe refreshing or helpful to hear. Terry says makes so much sense. Okay, good. Is donations, and I think that's also something we don't realize. And look, yes, from like the money part of my brain, there are donations that are tax write-offs, but I think for most of us in this group, we all got into our businesses because we started our businesses not only for making money. For as much as I love money, my brain is wired that way to like win at the game of money. I love people and service and my life and Life by Design and being of service far, far more. Otherwise, as you all know, I would have a very different business model. I would not be doing what I'm doing. I would be doing something else, and I'm sure I could succeed at that. I don't actually have doubts there, right? Like that matters to me far more than the money aspect. But a couple of things here that feel important to say. With that, both can coexist. And this is also a conversation we're having. I think sometimes when we hear about being of service, caring about what you do, having a life by design, caring about your family, caring about your people, right, and money, it is the conversation where it's like you have to pick one or the other. And if you pick money, you're a bad person. If you pick people, you're a good person, right? Like I think there's that kind of mentality. And a lot of the conversations we're having is how do we find the way to have both? There might be trade-offs associated with that because there are trade-offs with everything, but what's the way to have both and to see you can be a good person also like making money? And similarly with making donations, I think most of us, like I know for me, it is a value of mine and something we do every year is we allocate a certain amount to donate. And that is something that I'm not saying anybody else needs to do that, but that feels important to me. And we do it in different ways. We do it both with like traditional like companies you can donate through, but my husband and I are also big on like, let's leave that person $100 tip, or let's support someone we know who's having a hard time, right? Like we're big on that as well because that feels like a value of mine and that feels really good to me. But there are a couple of nuances here, and these are things we were talking about. Similarly, I do that because I feel an overflow and it feels good, not because I feel like I have to, or because I feel like this is the only way it's okay that I make money, or because I feel guilty that I'm making money, or because I feel like I should. Half of the stuff I do outside of me telling you right now, no one would even know. It's not like because I do this and people are going to pat me on the back. And I say this because I think donations in particular, for those of you who are super heart-centered, and for those of you who maybe feel, like I think one of the upper limits for people who are heart-centered and caring and service-driven with money is it can feel like if I make more than this amount of money, I'm bad, or I'm greedy, or I'm taking away from others, or it's only okay for me to make this if I'm also giving it away. And I think that can become a limitation and a trap, and also start to put some more stigma around money. And so I'm trying to think of how I want to frame this. So I think just seeing like part of the conversations we were having around this, and part of the conversation I had with my coach and my husband around this is I always want to be really clean around that. And clean meaning I'm doing this because I want to and it feels good. And it feels like it's coming from overflow. Not because I feel like I have to or I should, or this is what makes me good, or this is what makes me allowed to make more money, or because I'm like gaming the system because there's a manifesting thing that if you tithe 10%, you're going to get more. Like I think that can be kind of funny too. I did a podcast on this where when I was like basically broke in my business, it was like a 30-day experiment where every day I basically got something for someone. Sometimes I did something of service. Sometimes I bought someone behind me a cup of coffee. Sometimes it was like something of service. But I wasn't doing that to game the system. I was doing that to remind myself of how much I had, even when I felt like I was struggling and broke in New York City, and how much abundance there is available to me, that when I'm telling myself the story, I can't afford a cup of coffee, I actually can, and I can afford to buy one for the person behind me. It's sort of like that with donating. Like I don't do it from a place of I pity these people or this is how I game the system. It's more from a place of this is what makes me feel abundant. This is what makes me feel good. These are values of mine. These are causes I care about. I also know I've been in seasons of my life where I really benefited from a helping hand. And so I would like to pay it forward and give a helping hand, not because I think I owe someone something or because I feel bad for someone and think they can't do something on their own, right? Like I think there's all of this stuff that can get tied up into donations, which is why I almost didn't want to bring it here. But these are also the conversations we're all having and unpacking, because I think there are so many layers to this particular topic, and there's so much of the mindset and the emotional component along with our societal values and things like that. So I just wanted to bring it here because I do think there's quite a lot that gets stirred up there. And similarly, these are the things we're not always talking about. And so then if you're experiencing that, or you're seeing someone make a big donation without kind of understanding all of this, and then you have thoughts or charges or feelings, right? It can be very, very confusing. So I wanted to normalize some of that, but also to help you see like there are, I think, even with something as beautiful as making a donation, right? And to be in a place of overflow where you can make a donation, I think there is still can be, because money just becomes this charged, it is a very neutral tool and resource and asset, but it can become very charged. And this is why, right? There's all of these layers, even with something like making a donation. So that's some of the conversations we're having as well, along with, and I think this is maybe just helpful to normalize as well, along with the conversations of and now I'm over. So then I'm gonna hop off. Along with the conversations just around what it feels like to hold more money and more responsibility, because as you're making more money, right, you usually are paying way more taxes. You're usually paying way more team, right? I paid more in team and coaching and taxes expenses last year than I used to make in like 3 years, right? And so these are just real things. Like they're positive rates, right? It's like, oh gosh, I wish that was my problem. But these are real things that I think if you're not aware of can actually limit people from making more money. And so that was the last thing I wanted to close on. Like these are the conversations we're having as well. Just talking about normalizing some of those responsibilities, those decisions, normalizing some of both the positiveness, but the heaviness that can come with that if you're not being mindful, the expectations that can come from people who know you, also what it just means to show up and to hold a larger business at that level. So I think that's almost a whole nother live stream, but I didn't want to end this conversation about money without touching on that, because I think sometimes if you're in that space and you're not hearing those things, it can make you feel like you're doing something wrong or you're fucking things up. And these are just really, really normal conversations, and I think normal things to have to work through and unpack. And it's why I wanted to bring it here and why I love supporting my clients with that. Okay, now I am going to love you all and leave you, because my 2:00 client did have to reschedule her call, but usually I have a session right now, and I gotta be practiced at this with our new live stream time that I cannot go over, because otherwise I'll run into my client calls. So I love you all so much. Don't forget, we have a free masterclass coming up at the end of the month, 20K months multiplied. Even if 20K months aren't on your radar and you're more looking at making that first 1K or 3K month, come join us, because I think a lot of what we're talking about will be really valuable for you to know, because once your business grows, right, it can double really quickly. And this is so much about what goes into sustainably scaling. So I'd love to have you either way, but especially if you're at the place where you're making the 8K months, the 10K months, the 12K months, even 5K months, kind of up to that place, and you're looking to make those sustainable 20K months or more. And you're not wrong if you want to make that. I wrote this on the landing page. I do really think that is a stage of business where, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but it's just the truth. I think making 6 figures in business is such a milestone, and that changed my life. But making over 250K is when I think things get a lot easier, because everything we're talking about here, you get yourself into the position where you have the overflow for a team to build up the buffers, right? Like I think you just put yourself in a different financial place, because as a business owner, you do have expenses that someone as an employee does not. You're paying for your own health insurance, you're paying for a team, right? You're paying for support. Usually there are these very real expenses, and it's sort of like, to get to that stage, usually your profit margin has to almost go down for a little bit, and when you hit the 20K months or above, that's when it usually evens out, which is why it's not like an arbitrary number I pulled out of my behind. That's when you get to the 250K month or 250K year or above mark, and I think that's when things just become a lot easier, not better, but just easier for most business owners. So I would love to have you. Laura says, thank you, hands and hearts. I love you all so much. I'll be back next week. If you have dry shampoo tips for me, I was not kidding. I am so here for that. And I'll see you now next week. Bye, y'all.